So first, I would just like to present myself because maybe you're not used to this type of researcher. I'm a computer scientist, and I'm specialized in technology enhanced learning. And as Etienne said before, I'm in that field, in the domain of technology enhanced learning, or EdTech, as we call it nowadays. I'm specialized in serious games or simulations for learning. So today I'm going to present one of my first projects, one of my first research projects, which is actually starting to get old, but it's a project that was really interesting, and I'm hoping to continue it. I'll talk about the next steps of this project at the end of my presentation. So the project is called Tigris, and it's a professional training simulation with a virtual reality interview simulator. And what's interesting is that the simulator is configured and piloted by peers. This means that it's configured and piloted by humans that are actually training with other humans that are in the same domain. So our main interest was to see how emotions were dealt with in professional training. And actually, it's not that well dealt with. In any case, in France, we often just leave the emotions out of professional training. It's not something that's actually worked on properly. And this is a problem that was encountered by pedagogical counselors. So in French, we call them conseillers pédagogiques. And we actually worked with a team of pedagogical counselors. So after in the presentation, we'll call them PCs. So they actually had this problem that when they follow, so what they do in their work is that they follow up novice teachers and they go to see them 2 to 5 times a year. And what happens is that they observe how the class is dealt with, what's going on in the class. And right after, usually during recess, so when the kids are running around outside, they go to see the teacher, this novice teacher, and they do a counseling session during which they talk about what went well, the things that could be improved, etc. And this is when sometimes, not in all situations, but in 20% of the situations, they feel like the novice teacher that they're talking to and that they're supposed to counsel, they refuse the advice that they have to give them because they feel negative emotions. Either some of them start crying because they feel like they feel like it's in a bad situation. They feel like they weren't up to the expected how can I say, they weren't up to the task, basically. Or some of them are completely closed to advice and they're like, oh no, everything went well. I don't know what you're talking about. Or some are, completely just, they don't react correctly to these pedagogical counselors who are there to help them. And so this is really a problem for these pedagogical counselors because they want to help them, but they see that because of the emotions and because they don't know how to deal with these emotions, they just refuse the advice that they have to give them. And so it's hard to get to them, and they try, several times. They go back and they just see sometimes it just gets worse, sometimes it gets better. But anyway, the main idea is that these pedagogical counselors, they feel the need to be trained on how to deal with the emotions that are exposed by these novice teachers, and also how to deal with the emotions that they have themselves, because you're probably aware of what they call the mirror neurons. This is a phenomenon that happens that when you see someone that's sad, for example, the feelings that you see, you also integrate them to yourself. So either you're also going to feel sad if you have empathy for that person, or you might feel annoyed because you don't understand why that person is sad. So all these emotions that they're feeling as well is something that they need to learn how to deal with before trying to calm the situation and take this into account in their professional life. So we had several research questions on this project. The first one was how to create emotional situations that are useful for training these pedagogical counselors, because this was our context in which we were working, but it could be any kind of training context, professional training context. The second question was which tools to create the situations so that we have a strong resemblance to real situations, because we don't want to create situations that are nothing to do with the real situations, and then they won't be able to reuse the competencies that they acquired during the simulation in real situations. And the last question was, does virtual reality help learners become more aware of their emotions than a screen version? So here it's also because we work in technology enhanced learning, and there are several applications that offer virtual reality simulations that we thought, well, why not? This seems to be a good solution, a good technical solution to recreate emotions, to make people feel emotions. So is this really a good technological solution or not? So there are quite a few interview simulators that exist. So obviously we did a state of the art. I'm going to do it very briefly for you. There's VTS Editor, for example, up here on the left, that allows to train for a simulation, that allows to train for an interview. And so basically you have an avatar that's not controlled by anyone. It's an automatic avatar. And the avatar asks you questions, and then you basically have to answer. I don't know if you can see my my mouse, but you have to answer. You have to choose the answers, the possible answers. So here, obviously, what's happening is that you're clicking on the answer that you think is the best, and then the scenario unfolds depending on what you clicked on. So here, you're not really working on your communication skills because you're not actually talking. The trainee is just clicking on the answers. Mac is a bit better in the sense that the trainees talk. You see here, there's a person who's training. It's for an interview to get a job. So the person is talking. The trainee is talking to a virtual avatar, and this avatar actually, thanks to artificial intelligence, the avatar actually picks up certain keywords and then answers so that it's more or less natural. It's not always natural, but since it's in a very restricted area of job interviews, I mean, there's not a great quantity of things that they can say. So it's quite reduced anyway. So basically, they already have a tree of answers, possible answers. And by detecting the keywords that the trainee is saying, they determine in which branch of the tree they're going to go into. The last system I wanted to talk to you about is Ponder. This is actually a really old project, but it's the one that really inspired me, because what they're doing here is that you have a trainee who's training someone for reanimation. So someone's basically had a heart attack, and you have a virtual assistant, and the trainee is talking to the virtual assistant and telling the person what they should do. So for example, continue pumping or turn the person, etc. And what's interesting in this system is that the trainee, so the simulation, the virtual assistant and the simulation, is piloted in real time by the teacher, which you can see here. So this is really interesting because the teacher can adjust the simulation just the right way so that the trainee is actually pushed to his limits. And this is exactly what they wanted to do, because they wanted to see how trainees would react to a very high pressure situation. So I thought this was very interesting, and we wanted to test this type of simulation. And we wanted to keep the control of the avatar, of the situation. We wanted to keep it so that it was a human. So here it's the teacher who is piloting this, because we believe that he's capable of doing something that's exactly what the trainee needs. So this is why we proposed the Tigris tool. Well, it's not just a tool, it's actually a whole training situation. I'll talk to you about it after. But the tool, first I'm going to present the tool. So Tigris means Teacher Guided Realistic Interview Simulator. So this is what it looks like. So basically you have the trainer here, or the teacher, who is, in fact, in our case, an experienced pedagogical counselor, because the training session was done by peers. So it was pedagogical counselors training other pedagogical counselors. So actually, in our case, the trainer was an experienced pedagogical counselor. And in fact, we saw after that it wasn't just one, it was actually two experienced pedagogical counselors. But this is what we had planned in the beginning. So this trainer, the teacher, triggers the avatar. So the avatar is actually an embodied conversational agent. And so he triggers the sentences, the emotions, and the gestures of the avatar. Then the learner, which is also here, in our case, a pedagogical counselor, wears a headset, a virtual reality headset, and can see the avatar and just talks to the avatar normally, naturally, by trying to negotiate with him. And then his reactions are perceived by the trainer, which in turn triggers a new sentence or new emotions that's taken into account by the learner. And you can see that on the bottom, you have all the other learners, so in our case, still pedagogical counselors, that are observing the simulation. And after this, there's a session of a debriefing session, which is actually very important because they're going to be able to talk about what happened during the simulation and how they would have done it, and etc. So this is what the interface, the control interface looks like for Tigris. So you can see that there's the sentences. Oh, I'm sorry, this is not in English. So you see here, you have all the sentences that are actually grouped into types of sentences. And what's interesting is that all these sentences, they come from real situations that were analyzed by pedagogical counselors. So what they did is that they actually recorded situations, real situations, and try to identify what seemed to be causing the problem. And basically, we took all those problematic situations and we put them into the simulator to create a very dense, problematic situation, basically. So here you still have basic answers like yes, no, hello, I don't know, sometimes, so stuff like that. And here you have the emotions panel. So it's very basic. There's only 5 emotions. So anger, panic, sadness, anxiety, and joy. And we can also change the physical gestures of the avatar. So this is like looking upwards, crossing your hands, moving back like this, going forward. So all these gestures, all these embodied gestures are very important. And of course, I didn't tell you this, but the emotions that you trigger here have an effect, a direct effect on the emotions that you can see, on the facial expressions that you can see on the avatar. You can also choose different avatars, but in fact, this is not possible in the virtual reality version. We actually have 2 versions of Tigris, one in virtual reality and one that can be played on the computer on a big screen. So the one with virtual reality, for technical reasons, we only had one avatar available, which is Camille here. But in the other version, you could choose, you had a large choice of other agents. Actually, here I put 4 other ones, but I think there were at least 10. And also, what's important is that we identify in the beginning of the simulation, the teacher identifies a context in which, and this context, so here, for example, it's that the teacher is not invested, and the students don't seem to be learning, and they're standing on the tables. So this is a context that helps the trainee, how can I say, it helps the trainee imagine a real situation in which this could happen. So basically what happens during the simulation is that we give the context to the trainee. We say, okay, take a minute to try to rememorate a situation in which this is possible, and then they start the simulation. So we have several contexts which were also identified by the pedagogical counselors. So I'm going to show you a video. Let's see if it works. Can you still hear me? Have I lost you?
I'm listening you. You are online.
Okay.
But try the video to see.
Okay, I'll try the video.
Si tu te sens pas prête à essayer de revenir sur la séance ou essayer d'envisager ce qui pouvait être intéressant dans les interventions.
So here on the right, you can see a pedagogical counselor. So he's the trainee.
Il y a mon fils qui est souffrant.
D'accord. Donc ça te préoccupe et.
And here you see the avatar, which is
ça, pas de souci.
not answering very well. And the avatar, I remind you, is being controlled by two other pedagogical counselors. Here you see that she's definitely angry. She has an angry face.
Merci.
Eh ben, je t'en prie.
Okay, well, that was actually the end. But I can show you another bit, maybe. I'll show you maybe the beginning.
Les moments où je suis intervenu, tu te souviens que la manière dont
What's interesting is here you can see that the trainee is really trying to open up the discussion.
Après, c'est pas pour ça que c'est parfait. À ton avis, si tu essayes de te remémorer les moments de.
And you can see that the avatar is not talking very much.
À ton avis, qu'est-ce que j'ai pu.
And is in a very
closed
position because she's like this and that.
Pour moi, ça ne sert à rien.
Now, you see the answer here, for example, she says that it's useless. Here she's not answering.
Quand tu dis que ça ne sert à rien, tu penses à quoi?
So here you can see that the trainee is kind of
Ils ont fait tout ce que je voulais.
Here the trainee is saying
Ils ont bien participé.
the avatar is saying the students did everything that they wanted, everything she wanted. They didn't lose any time. It wasn't bad.
Et par rapport
so basically you can see here that she's in denial. She thinks everything's okay. And you can also see that the trainee is not very, he's kind of stressed, he's kind of nervous because he doesn't really know how to react to this teacher that's definitely, she doesn't see the problem and there's a definite problem. So I think that's enough. We can come back to the video later if you want. I'll continue the presentation. I just wanted to add that this project was really, it wasn't just a one-year project. It was led on several years. I think it was 4 years, and we used the design-based and user-centered research method. So basically, this means that we did several iterations of development. Well, we co-designed the tool with the end users. So in this case, a group of pedagogical counselors. And so at the very beginning, for example, we didn't even have the idea of virtual reality. So we wanted to test it. I went to one of their training sessions, and at the end of the training sessions, I said, okay, I think I see what you're trying to do. I think I see what your problem is. Do you think a virtual reality could be a technology that could work for this situation? And I actually came with a virtual reality headset. I came with a game, and they tested it, and they said, yes, this looks like it's promising. So then they worked on the transcriptions and the analysis of their real interviews. Then we also had a phase the year after that, we also had a phase where we had to choose the avatar because there were different technologies available. Then we developed the first version of Tigris. Then we improved it. Then the next year, a second version, then we improved it. Then the third year, we had a third version. And unfortunately, in March 2020, there was the COVID. So that was it. It kind of stopped the project very, very hastily. We actually had an experimentation plan the next day, and it just cut everything off. But what I wanted to say is that this project wasn't built in 1 year or even 1 day. It was a very gradual project. And so what I'm going to show you now is really the work that's been done on several years. And the tool was continually enhanced. So what I also wanted to show you is that the Tigris is not just a tool. The idea is to use it within a training session. So we have the simulation that is actually quite short. Well, I put 4 minutes, but I think it's a bit more. I didn't change these numbers. I'm sorry. You'll see the right numbers after. So we have the simulation, and as you can see here, there's two. So this is the trainee who sees this in the virtual reality headset. And here they decided very naturally to, instead of being one pedagogical counselor to pilot the avatar, they decided to be two very quickly. And actually they did the whole session like that. And we didn't really intervene. I mean, we said, okay, fine, if you think you're comfortable like that. And I don't really know why, and maybe we can discuss about this later. But yeah, they decided to do that. And here you can see another session where there's two other pedagogical counselors who are triggering the movements and the sentences of the avatar. And so what's important is that after the simulation, there's a debriefing session, which is much, much longer than the simulation. The debriefing went on for like at least 13 or 15 minutes for each simulation that was just 5 minutes long. So this was also very important. And it's during this debriefing session that we saw the value of the test, because you really saw that they actually talked about real situations that had happened and how it reminded them of what they had relived in the simulation. And they also talked about what they could improve. And we could also show a video of them doing the simulation. And this was also very interesting because they were like, wow, I hold myself like that. That's weird. And oh, wow, I didn't think I talked like that. And I mean, there were lots of interesting things that came from the debriefing session, much more than just the interview. So the interview is just there. The simulation is just there to recreate the emotions. And then it's during the debriefing session that really everything happens. So we led several experimentations. So as I said, it's a project that went on for 3 years. So in fact, the first year we had 12 pedagogical counselors. So what we did is that we used the professional training sessions. They have 1 day of professional training session. This is at the Rectorat de Nantes per year. So we used that session to do our experimentations. So the first year we had 12 PCs. The next year we had 17, and then the next year we only had 3. Unfortunately, as I said, the next day we were supposed to have like 15 other people, but that's the way it is. And what we did is that we separated them in 2 groups. Well, the first 2 years. The third year there were so few, we put them all in group A. But for 2018 and 2019, we separated them in 2 groups. The first group did the simulation with Tigris in the morning, and then the role play in the afternoon, which was the usual technique that they used. And each time we asked them to, so there was debriefing sessions, of course, and we asked them to answer emotion questions. The group B did the other way around. They did the simulations with the role play in the morning and then the simulations with Tigris in the afternoon. And then at the end of the day, we also asked them to answer a final questionnaire where they could compare the 2 types of simulations. So as I said, we actually tested different types of simulation. This was a comparative experimentation. So the first one was the role play, which is what they were used to do. So here we have 11 simulations in all. The second one was Tigris screen, which we set up because we wanted to answer a third question. If you remember, we wanted to know if the virtual reality actually helped them to feel the emotions more than no virtual reality. So we wanted to be able to compare. So we had a Tigris with screen, and then we also had a Tigris with virtual reality. And here we had 25 simulations because basically we only used the Tigris screen the first year. And once we saw that definitely the virtual reality did help, we switched all to virtual reality. So all the interviews that were done in role play, with Tigris screen or with Tigris VR were all filmed. As you can see, there's cameras all over. And here, I don't think we had a camera, but we had an audio. And they were analyzed by my colleague that works in social sciences. And we were able to get to do some basic observations, like the fact that the duration, for example, of the simulation and the duration of the debriefing. And this is where we see big differences already. So I'm going to spend a few minutes to talk about that. If you look at Tigris screen, for example, and Tigris VR, basically, you can see that the duration of the simulation is like 6 to 7 minutes, whereas with the role play, it's much, much longer. It goes up to 16 minutes. However, what's interesting is that the duration of the debriefing session that's right after is much longer with Tigris than the role play. With Tigris, it goes up to like on average 13 minutes, whereas with the role play, the debriefing session is very quick. It's only 7 minutes. This is something that we'll talk about after. We also saw that the number of interactions, we also compared the number of interactions. So what we call interactions is sentences that are said, and the number of incidents. What we call incidents are situations that create a feeling of, oh dear, there's a problem. The person doesn't understand me correctly. There's something that I need to change. This definition of incident, I can give it to you later. This is also my calling in social science who analyzes this. And so what we were able to see is that the number of interactions with Tigris, we have a much higher number of interactions, and we also have a much higher number of incidents. Basically, this means that the simulations with Tigris were much more intense in terms of incidents per interaction. Whereas in the role play, there are very few incidents, and the number of interactions are also quite low. I mean, well, it's kind of the same as the number here. So basically, it means that there's just, well, here you can see twice as many incidents. And this, maybe I should have showed you the one that's per minute, because remember that here we have about the same number of interactions, but the role play is actually more than twice as long. So in fact, all this is just extended on a longer time. So Tigris is not only provides more incidents, but also in a much shorter amount of time. So we could say it's more efficient if we want to express this. So in terms of questions, we were able to analyze the questionnaires, of course. And if we want to answer the question 1, so how to create emotional simulations that are useful for training, well, we have several indicators. First of all, we can say that Tigris, well, the duration and the content of the debriefing sessions is a good indicator that there's something more that happens with Tigris, because the debriefing sessions were much longer. And what's interesting is that you can see that the users, the trainees, say things like, wow, it's bluffing. You have to get used to the virtual world. And you have the word destabilizing that comes up a lot of time. A destabilizing situation, especially the words and the facial expression of the avatar. Here too, the last sentence, it was unsettling, but I was unsettled by what the avatar said and distraught because I was forced to talk about subjects I had not planned. Basically, what you see is that with the simulation with Tigris, the trainees are pushed. They're not in their comfort zone. They're definitely in a destabilizing situation, maybe stressful situation. You can also see it with their facial expressions. You could see that they're biting their lips. They're doing like this. They're doing like this. You can see that they're not themselves. They're not, cool and relaxed like they usually are. You can also see in the questionnaire. So here we asked them if the Tigris or the role play allowed them to reflect on their professional practice. You can see that the answer is strongly agree for the Tigris and a bit less for the role play. Although the results are still very good, it's a bit better for Tigris. The downside is that we definitely saw that the fact of testing virtual reality for the first time for all of the people who were present, it kind of created a stress. And the fact that they were also being watched by everyone, it created a feeling of being judged in public, and they also had the feeling of competition. So this is not so good maybe for a training situation. So it counterbalances the good effects maybe that we have here. I would say it's still a good, I would say it's still quite good, but not as maybe good as we expected it. For the second question, so what tools to create a simulation that have a strong resemblance to real situations? Well, we can say that the indicators that allow us to say that Tigris was able to recreate situations that look like a real situation was the fact that we were able to integrate all the interactions that came from the PC's experience, so real interviews. And we also were very surprised by the length of the interviews. We actually thought that they would maybe last like 2 minutes maximum. And the fact that they lasted for 7 minutes was, we thought, quite incredible. And we really saw that they were really invested in the simulation. It wasn't, I mean, they really got into it. So I think that was very positive. On the downside, when we look at the questionnaires and we ask them does the simulation remind you of a real situation? You see that the answers are almost the same, basically, whether it's Tigris Screen, Tigris VR, or Roleplay. This can be explained mostly by the novice professional counselors who came to this training session and who hadn't actually had any difficult situations in their real life. And so when they were faced to Tigris Screen or Tigris VR with this avatar that's very harsh and very difficult, for them it didn't reflect a real situation because they hadn't lived any situations like that before. I have to remind you that these difficult situations only occur 20% of the time. So if you're a very novice teacher and you've only been working like for a year or 2 years, then it's normal that you haven't encountered these kind of problematic situations. Here, these are a few sentences that were said by the trainees. The situation is credible. Several of the agents' responses are related to actual interviews. So there they really felt that the responses, the answers that they were giving were reminded them of real interviews. The emotions felt are very similar to those experienced when facing a teacher in an observation situation. So this is interesting because here they're saying that the emotions that they felt are the same that those that they felt in real situations. This was a very interesting point. To finish, so the third question, does VR help learners become more aware of their emotions than the screens? Well, I said the answer is definitely yes. Not a huge yes, but a definite yes. If you look at the questions here, I felt emotions during the simulations. You see that for Tigris VR, we're definitely above Tigris Screen and much higher above Roleplay. And you can also see, we asked them which emotions they felt, to express the emotions, to write them down. And you can see that the emotions are, first of all, there's more emotions here than here. And they're more, they gave this information much more often than here. So here, in like half of the cases, half of the time, they weren't able to express which emotion they felt. Whereas here, I think almost everyone answered gave at least one word. Here we asked them to give 3 words to describe the simulation. And as I said, you find formative, realistic, fun, impressive, interesting, fascinating even. Here it's kind of the same, but as you can see, it's just less intense, basically. I'm not sure I read this. I can read it too. So some of the trainees said, this virtual simulation allows to focus more on the words and attitude. This was a trainee who had actually tried both. He had tried Tigris Screen and Tigris VR. Another one said a better feeling and perception of emotions. A lot of them said, wow, I didn't even realize that the avatar had emotions on the face when they were on the screen. And when they saw it in VR, they said, oh yeah, I see much more. I could perceive the emotions much better in the VR. And it's true that, I mean, physically they're the same length, but it's just that, yeah, since you're immersed in virtual reality, I guess you can concentrate on all those items much better. And last one, a better involvement in the exchange. So where are the limitations? Well, there's several limitations. First of all, we noticed that the gestures were rarely triggered. If you remember correctly, there's several on the, I'll come back to the control panel. So this is the control interface. And when we looked at which elements were actually clicked, well, the sentences here were obviously clicked quite a bit, these two, and they use the emotions, but the gestures, they use them very, very rarely. So this was a pity because there's lots of things that we can do with gestures. So what we did, so this was the first year. And so what we did next time for the next year is that we automatically triggered some of the gestures and some of the emotions depending on the category of the interventions here. So for example, if the sentence was in this category, which is a refus, which is a, how do you say refus? I can't remember, it means no. Then we automatically put her in anger. We automatically triggered the anger mode. And I can't remember, maybe I think we did reculer, so she was back like this, or I can't remember exactly. All this was also worked with, this was all decided with the pedagogical counselors to know which emotions and which movements should be triggered automatically with which sentences. And you can see it here. Oh, maybe I'll show you later. The other problem was the fact that, so there were two piloting the avatar, and we quickly realized that they couldn't pilot easily when they were two, mainly because there was just one mouse. And so the next year we put two mice to control the interface, but there was still just one mouse on the screen, and they were actually interfering with one another, so it wasn't that practical. So this is something that could also be changed. And the last problem was that the pronunciation of the ECA, the pronunciation of the avatar wasn't always clear, and so this kind of created a problem in the simulation, because the avatar said something and the trainers were like, what did you say? And it kind of made them come out of the simulation, out of the zone. So as I said, we tried to improve the control interface little by little, and we managed at the end to have much more emotions and gestures by triggering them automatically depending on what the avatar was saying. But this is also a problem because some sentences could actually be said with different emotions. So then which one do you choose? So we decided to choose the one that was, we decided to trust the pedagogical counselors to tell us which one was the best. But it's kind of restrictive, because then we don't have all the liberty that we could have. So what we were thinking of is maybe using a semi-automatic artificial intelligence system that could maybe learn of what was done before, or maybe decide which is the type of avatar, or its personality basically, and then change the emotions and the gestures, add emotions and gestures automatically. So this is something that we would like to work on. And the other thing that we would like to work on is to update the avatars, because the one that we have is really starting to get old, even though it wasn't really a problem for the trainees. They didn't say, oh, this looks really old, probably because they didn't know anything else existed. But So for those who know, who are in the domain, there are avatars that are much more realistic now. This is a domain that goes really fast, and there's new novelties every year. And I was looking into the meta-humans that are developed by Unreal Engines. And so you can see there's a few faces here. And so these are virtual, these are avatars that are extremely realistic. Now the question is, are there emotions, are there facial expressions also realistic, or is it just you know, the look? So this is also an interesting question. And then the other thing that we would like to do is to test the system in other contexts, because all the elements that you saw on the control interface, everything can be changed, everything can be customized depending on the context and in the educational domain you want to train for. So we also had a few unexpected scientific contributions that were a good. It was a good surprise. First of all, we saw that the avatar was better than an actor. Well, maybe I should put a question mark because we're not quite sure of this. But in any case, it was clearly better than the situations with role playing. And we believe this is for two reasons. First of all, being in front of a screen gives more distance to the trainees, and it therefore allowed them to be more, how can I say, more honest. And well, as you can see here, that the sentence is, I think that's quite clear. The tool allows us to be brutally confronted to the resistance of a teacher. And this resistance is also there with a real teacher, but it is masked by politeness. It's the word politeness that's important, because basically even when you're doing a role play, you're not going to be brutal with the person. You're going to, you know, not go too harsh, especially if it's a colleague of yours. So the fact using an avatar is actually, we believe, could be really beneficial for this type of training, because it's brutal. That's the way it is. If the avatar looks really nasty, it will look really nasty, and it's not going to, you know, try to be nice and everything because it doesn't want to be nasty with you. It will be brutal. And this is, I think, the key to realizing, to having how can I say, an electric shock and saying, wow, this is actually what happens. This is a bit brutal, but this really allows me to relive the situation. And with this electric shock, maybe try to rethink of, you know, the ways that you teach or what you do in your professional, in the professional circumstances in which this happens. The other thing that seems important is the fact that having a human pilot is better than an artificial intelligence, especially because we saw that the trainers, so the people who were piloting the system, they really created custom experiences for the trainees, and they picked up information that they had, like when we were eating or when we were having a coffee. And so they picked up this little information about the type of difficulties that the people were having, or the style, the look even of real people that they were, of real teachers that they had been training and that they had problems with. And they took all these informations and they reused them right away in the Tigris tool, just to experience that was designed just for that trainee. And we really see that this type of very fine customization is not possible by an artificial intelligence, simply because they don't have this kind of information. It's information that you get, you know, at the coffee break or before, because you know the person, because you've seen him in another training session or things like that. So I think I finished. So to conclude, this was a project that was done a few years ago, 5 years ago, I think now, but that's been going on for several years. The idea was to recreate a simulation to relive emotions, produce destabilization, or what I called an electric shock, and so that you could think of reevaluate the way that you work, basically, and try to solve those problems with your peers, with the other trainees that are there and that do the same job as you. That's it.
Wonderful. I am very impressed by this presentation, and most important thing about the apparatus you imagine. So maybe I could offer another point of view as a media analyst, and because here in this situation of simulation with the public around the teacher and the trainee, with the question of the display, what kind of display is more efficient, and the comparative approach between VR, helmet, and screen display. The question of the simulation of interaction also. We have all the components that we study here since a long time through, for example, concept like a spectacularization of interaction. You have an interaction, and with interactivity with the device, with the computer, a video game, someone, and each time you have a public, you have spectators. There are a special phenomenon that amplify an amplification of what happened, because it's not only a live show, it's something happened now in front of us. It's a testimonial, I don't know the name in English, to be a witness, yes, to the witness aspect of the story. And they give more importance, more strong force what happened. There is also the fact we are in a role-playing game. I study a role-playing game since 30 years, and I love the role-playing game. And I discovered the results in your study that show that it's very difficult to play a role because you have all the social markers of respect. For example, you couldn't be brutal, like you explained. You are an interpret, you are an actor or something. But if you are a classic professional, you are not a professional of act. So you have to think about what I do, what I try to replicate, but without the skills of the real comedian, a real actor. So it's usually very difficult, and I am not surprised, but by the fact that it's more cool, more relaxed, more consensual interaction than if we are a real situation. So I come up with a lot of things, but in fact, I want to understand the different aspects. It was funny because at the end you explained it was like electric shock. And in a few seconds before, 1 minute before, I think about the Milgram experiments. The Milgram experiments, it's a very famous experiment in psychology where people have to torture someone with electric shock. And if there is distance, if there is an apparatus, a mirror or some distance, it's more easy. And it's funny because I think about the apparatus, I think about the situation, and I think, okay, there is the persona, the mask of avatar, the interface, they are together, and we come back at the fact it's a shared presence, a shared avatar. And it's clear, it's all the design and the fact we are on the system of control. The fact is you have sentences, there is choice. You have to, so all the direction of the command are very directed to make difficulties at the person. So it's
absolutely, yes, it's
intentional concretization of the design is to push away the limits or to do something very strong. Yes. So I try to say that it's evident that the design have a direction, but it gives the power at the controller, the tandem, the binomial, the team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the team of pilots. Yeah.
Because there is no other choice to make problem. It's not an interface to have care. Don't worry. I don't know.
Yes, and I would add that they added extra difficulties, because they could have chose the easy sentences, because we do have sentences, basic sentences like yes, I don't know, maybe, but they intentionally made it even harder than it was intended for. So you can see that they're really pushing. They want to put the trainee in difficulty, because that's also that's when you change, basically. That's when you understand that something's wrong or that something can be improved. Because if you're in your comfort zone all the time, then you don't do anything. You're like, okay, it works, so that's fine.
So,
and this was one of the big problems with the role playing, as you were saying. It was too consensual. They were like, okay, oh yes, you did this, all right. They were playing a normal situation, and it wasn't hard enough, basically. So everything went well, and during the debriefing, it was very short because there was nothing to say. They were like, oh well, yeah, I've had this situation already. Yeah, it went well. Yeah, I see that you use that. That's interesting. And there's one that even said, oh, I think this was fun. And the other ones, they didn't say it was fun. They said, wow, yes, I'm really, that was intense. I didn't realize this and this. And, I really think, I remember this situation where I had the same problem and I was stuck. And wow, I'm glad I got rid of that person, but I didn't know what to do then. And then that's when it opens up to the discussion with the other professional counselors, pedagogical counselors, sorry. And the other pedagogical counselors also had things to say, like, oh yeah, well, I had the same situation too, and what I did was this and this. And then another one says, well, yeah, but the problem is if you do that, then does this work, and blah, blah, blah. And you could really see that there was a real discussion after the simulation with the avatars. And with the other, it was just almost like a monologue, like, oh yeah, I liked it.
I think the systems cut the continuum of interpersonal consensual interaction. In a classroom, if you try to make an exercise with students, it's my job, I know that, you're always in the continuum of the classroom. You move the table, you make okay, it's help. But with the immersive technology, it's the concretization that you change of our environment. You are not here. It cut the continuum, and it pushes you to be at another level to train your skill. So there is a distance and a second degree.
Yes.
So if you create that with technology, with the game also, because the game is always interpreted as a secondary activity. If you create that, you make a distance, a gap with the reality. And when we come back, there is a deeper debrief and more reinterpretation of what happened, because you see really the switch between here now and the simulation. And I think it's
yes, you're absolutely right. And in the debriefing, or in the questionnaires, we also had the prise de recul, which is in French means, yes, they moved back and they saw the bigger picture, basically, and they saw themselves, how they were, they were able to analyze themselves. I don't know how to say. I'm sorry, I'm just a computer scientist. I don't think I have the right words.
I'm not agree. You are not only a computer scientist. You're a lot of things, because you integrate all the parameters of the situation, and you debate with anthropological centered approach, user centered approach, you say?
Yes,
you integrate the sense of the action for the people, for the final user, and you create with people. So the iterative.
Yes, that's yeah. It's yes, that's what gives meaning to our job, basically, because if you don't do that, then you just create tools and then they're never used, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But in fact, it's funny because in the term, to come back to the subject of the seminary about avatar, I try to think about what kind of avatar is. The question is it the avatar of the typical teacher in difficulty? It's clear that the script try to express the 20% of people of teacher in difficulty with classroom. So it's functional and fictional, not fictional, but it's the typical teacher with problem. I think so. It's avatar of that. It's also the avatar of the team of the people, the person who control, but they control it with a shared activity. You explain there is a division of work.
Yes, they what we observed, but we weren't really concentrating on that. So we really didn't really. I don't even think we have data on how they shared. But what we observed is that one person was taking care of the sentences, and the other person was taking care of the right part of the screen, so the emotions and the gestures.
Mm-hmm. So this avatar is inhabited. There's someone inside. And when you explain that the EA would be not so efficient, I think imagine for the experimenters who try to the situation. If you know there is someone behind or inside a body, you never interpret the thing simply, but it's a script behavior, but you limit the avatar at some algorithmic. It seems it's human, semi-automatic system. I think so. So there is the two aspects. I've got an idea there is someone behind this virtual character, but it's not free. It's very scripted by some combinatory options.
Yes.
But for that's why it seems it's really an avatar for me and not other thing, because there is a living aspect, because there's a human aspect, but a completely programming and scripted algorithmic process, limitation of that. And maybe it's the most strong aspect to be a stereotypical caricature, like a caricature. I don't know the name.
Yes, you're right. And that's it. Yeah, it's a caricature of the worst that you could get.
Yes, and for that, different negative aspect of your evaluation. I don't remember, but you say it
didn't seem similar to a real. Well, for some of the trainees, it did not seem similar to a real situation.
Yes,
because they never really had that kind of situation yet.
But in fact, it's an advantage, because we have the worst, we have like a nightmare.
Nightmare.
It's a pattern of the worst pattern of behavior that we call myth, and simulation of not of reality but of antagonism, in fact. Or something like that. So I think the schematic, usually we say in the simulation, is too schematic. It's not absolutely in fidelity with reality, and it's a problem. It's too basic, it's too generic. But it's sometimes it will be very useful to liberate what people think really. She's crazy. This teacher haven't the sense of adaptation. I couldn't manage him. A lot of things. And I remember the point when you say it's a problem. There is public because I lost the authority. It's clear an examinator, when we go in a classroom and take 10 minutes, a teacher between two classrooms, have a full authority. There's no one, it's intimate. And there is a strong power when you express your advice at the person, the trainee, not the trainee, but the teacher.
The teacher, yeah, the novice teacher.
Very useful to have a public of peer, because it's not the same. There is something else, and there's no the classical authority. So I think at least that it's in the ECA. ECA is the difference. It's inside the difference between simulation and reality that you have a lot of opportunity like that. I'm not alone with the person, there's public, etc. So I think it's a strong thing. But usually the discourse about we have to be more realistic, we have to be more perfectly in correspondence with reality. It's not absolutely always true. It's not always true.
Yeah, it's not always useful for what you want to do with it. That's true, yeah. What we wanted was not, we didn't really want the situation to be like a real situation. We wanted it to recreate the emotions, similar emotions to those that they had lived before. So it's not really a direct equality. It's more like a, I don't know, it's like a step forward, or but we wanted it to we wanted them to relive things that they had already lived, so that they would be able to talk about them and find a solution during the debriefing session with their peers. That was the idea. And you're absolutely right about the fact that they were much more honest, and they did during the debriefing session with after talking with the avatar, they would say things like, yeah, she's a total, B or whatever. Did you see her? I mean, I can't believe it. She wasn't talking like that. And what was also interesting is that the fact that it was an avatar and not a real person, we had the impression that they were able to reimagine, how can I say, to project real people into the avatar. You see what I mean? They said they talked about much more people, that they had much more real people in which they had the same situation. Whereas when they did the role playing, they never said, oh yeah, you looked like a person that I saw before. Whereas with the avatar, they said, oh yes, she reminds me of this and this and this person. Amazing. Definitely, she was exactly like this.
Okay. Amazing results, because you say that the generic aspect and the fact is not a human, avatar is not human, help to correlate, because I try to develop a correlation theory about the serious gaming, because when you are engaged in a role-playing game, in a simulation, you try to remobilize that your knowledge, your skills, the pattern, the scheme, interpretative scheme and adaptation of. But sometimes it's correlation, there is correlation or not correlation, and the problem is to mobilize, to have a projective approach, because if you put only one case, it's the case. But if you have a little blur, the flu.
Exactly. Yes.
The avatar has a blur support of projection.
Yeah. I see what you mean. Yeah, that's exactly, that's my intuition. I should read again the whole data and see if we can find proof to kind of prove what we're saying, but it's definitely my intuition is that they were able to project other people much easier, much more easily in this avatar that just looks like a basic avatar. It doesn't really look, like anyone. It could be anyone basically. Whereas if it's a real person, you have, it's too it's too precise. And maybe you also don't want to, for politeness reasons, you don't want to say that this person looks like another person that they didn't really get along with, that they had problems with. Whereas the first person is a colleague, or even if it's an actor, I don't think you would do that because it's still a real person.
Another question, maybe to start the question section, because I comment a little bit. Have you make an interview about the pilot of Avatar? Because I'm very interested about what's when you change role, when you are inside the head of the person in front of you, like you experiment empathy and the fact to be another one, the fact to be together, how it affects your vision of the teacher, and maybe we could construct a special questionnaire, a special interview to analyze what's changed inside the head of the controller of Avatar, and maybe I don't know if you do that before, because I think your focus is under the person in front of, but if they turn inside the group, I'm very. What do you think about the idea to find another axe of the research? What's it changed? Because maybe there is something here more powerful that we could find.
Yeah, maybe. I think you're right. What's I remember something that happened often is that the two pilots, or the two pilots, or the couple or the team of pilots, you could see that they were working, and then you could see when there were some weird situations because they were like looking at each other. And what happened, not all the time, but sometimes at the end, they would laugh because one of them had done something that was not how can I say, it didn't fit what the other person was doing. And so they kept it, I mean, they tried to stay serious during the simulation, but at the end they were like, did you see I did this when you were doing this? But yeah, during the simulation, they were very quiet. But yeah, that happened often at the end. So you could see that they also had sometimes difficulties, and sometimes they had actions that could be, that were not, how can I say, they were not logical together.
Okay, there is a classical coordination problem, and usually you laugh because it's
awkward.
Yes. But the fact is, symbolically, the controller of Avatar lived the life of a teacher in difficulty.
Yes.
And maybe discover the connection between I don't love my job, or I've got a problem at home. Like maybe they change your mind about the life, the intimate life, or the direction, because it's when you've got an examinator who say, why do you punish some students, or I don't know. So it's really about the change of perspective. You materialize the change of perspective between all the group. I think because they turn in between the
yes, they turn. It wasn't imposed. So whoever wanted to be pilot could be pilot, and whoever wanted to be a trainee could be trainee. And but you're absolutely right. And we didn't ask them any questions about the fact that they were impersonating a teacher, a novice teacher, and did that help them to rethink their way of leading these interviews in real life. We didn't do that because we actually weren't expecting it. There is a teacher, it was my colleague in social science, who was supposed to pilot, and she didn't really feel at ease with the computer. So she said, does anyone want to take my place? And then that's when they went there naturally. And since they had been working with us for a year before, building the content, they saw everything basically. Well, I think they weren't scared of it. They took it in really easily. And the fact that they saw that after the first test, we were able to change things, but because there were lots of things that weren't right. The sentences, for example, I mean, I think it kind of, it reassured them that they could see that the whole thing, the whole simulation could be changed and customized like they wanted it to be. They were able to how can I say, to make the tool theirs. I don't know if that's clear.
Because before I give a word at Kevin, to conclude to my part, I think it's all the apparatus, all the situation, all the dispositif, we say in French, who work. In fact, the fact to change place, to be at the place of another person in the time, to remember. I think the strongest, if we take the systemic approach of what's happened, it's all those presence, those attention. Everybody is attentive with other, who make the powerful aspect of the systems. And I think we could rediscover, because it's always a problem. You have to demonstrate something. You need clue. You need result. So you focus. And what we try to do in our approach is to reintegrate all the components, the symbolic, how you explain the rules of the situation that people, how they live, and they are curious about what's happened when I will control or command, because it's more command than control. But when I will command the avatar, I want to try something else. And all these dynamics, all these relation, all this context, the situation, create the powerful transformation of each one. And that's why I try to explain when you talk about me, the avatar project, that because we try to reconnect together. I try to explain to you that if we make a semiotic and a socio-dynamic analysis of the situation, we could find another powerful results. Because if we are only about, but the comparative approach is beautiful in this case also. I love it. I was very seduced by that.
It's also what allows us to publish, basically. So yeah, and you're absolutely right. It's like we're looking for clues, so we focus and and we have like eyes like this, and we forget everything else. But this is really nice to have a new fresh overview of the project, and you're absolutely right. I think we could do lots of things. Unfortunately, if the tool, I don't know, I haven't touched it for 2 years, so I'm not sure it still works. You know how computer science is.
I know the problem.
But yeah, we could try again, and with another approach. That would be interesting. Yeah.
Okay, Kevin, maybe you want to space it.
Yes. First, thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting. I have some questions to make sure I understand everything. The first is the debriefing sessions are done with the learner pedagogical. I will say pieces.
Yeah.
The learner pieces and the observing pieces, or just with the learner?
All the PCs. The PC that did the simulation, the 2 PCs that were piloting the avatar, and all the other PCs that were looking.
Okay. Do the PCs observing the situations have the same feedback and perceptions of the emotions as the learner?
Well, they were behind the learner, so I don't think they saw everything. I mean, we saw a lot of things because we were filming them in front, so we saw maybe more emotions. But even if you're in the back of someone, you can still feel. And I think there was a strong feeling of empathy, because they were all, first of all, when one trainee said, "Okay, I'll go," everyone was like, "Wow." he's so great. And so they were all looking at him. And I think there was a strong feeling of empathy, like, yeah, you can do it. You can do this simulation and win it, even though there wasn't anything to win. And so I think they did live the situation with the learner, and you can see it in the films. You can see that they also look stressed when the simulation is going on. They're like, oh no, oh. You can see their emotions. We didn't really analyze them, but you can definitely see that they're living it. Now, is there a difference in the way that they perceive the emotions? I'm not sure. We didn't really look into that.
How do you control the visual recognition of the emotions by the learner or by the observer?
We didn't analyze them at all. We just looked at the videos, and as humans, we can see that they're feeling things, but we didn't use an algorithm or any automatic control of automatic detection of emotions, for example, if that's what you're asking.
No, it's more how do you choose this emotion? It's anger, and it will perceive as anger by all people.
Or you design.
Oh, how did we design the emotions? Okay, actually,
controls, it's really what you want
to check.
Okay, we didn't do that part. We actually took a model, a multi-model well, whatever. Basically, there's anger, and then the anger is expressed by different things, by the eyebrows that are more like this, by a closed face, by the fact that their head is a bit lower, lots of little facial expressions that we did not control, because that was all done by another researcher, and we just took their model as is. And I think that the work that they did is quite it's very, I mean, it's a work that's been going on for several years. It's in several European research projects. So it's, I mean, we're quite sure of the model that we chose. It's called the Greta model. You can look it up on. So we took the avatar with the model inside it. We just took the whole thing. What we did is that we plugged it with this interface, this control interface, and then we designed the whole training system around this tool.
Do you want to set up this case more immersive possible, or do you want to
keep only the version?
Keep a link with our world?
That's a good question. What was important for us is that it recreated emotions. So our first idea was the fact that virtual reality and virtual reality games, for horror games, for example, is a very strong way of feeling scared or whatever. So we thought that's our initial idea, was to use virtual reality and the immersive effect of virtual reality to recreate emotions. But is it important that they're really cut off of the world? I'm not sure. Now that Etienne says that it's important to also know that there's people watching, maybe not. I don't know. What do you think?
Because I ask this because I don't understand why there are pieces observing. It's for me, it's have someone from the outside observing you. It's
change your behavior.
Can have an effect to my ability to feel in the virtual world.
Mm-hmm.
So on my ability to immerse in it.
Right, I understand. Well, I think it was just, first of all, a practical reason, because what do? We put them in another room and then we have to film the whole thing. What we wanted is the debriefing session after, where everyone who had watched the simulation could help could, you know, provide their feedback and say, this is what I would do in this situation. This is what I would do in this situation. That was the most important. It was to have that debriefing session. And so the fact that they're there watching while the simulation is occurring seemed just easier to set up. But as Etienne said, it could also be useful because when you know that people are observing you, you're maybe not going to act naturally, but that's not what we want. We want people to think of what they're going to say, prendre du recul. We want them to you know, take a step back and think of what they're going to do and maybe the way it's going to be perceived. It's I think this could actually be useful for the training purpose of the simulation.
But at the end, it's a formation, and the PC learner will be alone with the teacher in the
at the end, at the professional.
Yes, you're right. At the end, the professional will be alone. But it's not. We're not trying to recreate a realistic simulation. We want them. It's a training session, so we want them to reflect on what they're doing.
In fact, you use the collective intelligence to create other approach, because the problem usually in a professional skills is to always make the same thing and to be enfermé, to be blocked.
To be locked in their usual way of doing things. Yeah.
And when you make a formation, it's very useful to have the support of the group to create a team dynamics and collective intelligence with several points of view, with reflexivity, with distance, and to question the habits and what you do usually, etc. So I think it's very useful to keep us open situation with everything is transparent, because if you do with different rooms, maybe the controller in another room, the person only alone with a helmet, VR helmet, and another public inside a room with a screen, it's possible to do that, but it's not the same result of integration of intersubjectivity, because one of the questions is the phenomenon of intersubjectivity, here assisted by technology, and translate with the mediatization of each other, and we saw in the pictures that we are in the same room.
Yes.
In common, there is a common world, and maybe the immersive object of avatar, the projection inside the new world, appear very strange when you are together in the same room with the clothes, with the same temperature and situation, and you look at technology together. That's why your dispositif, your apparatus, your experiments seems so interesting for us, because it's not the final solution for each other, and it's open. It's not closed by the market, by the culture of serious gaming.
Yeah, absolutely. It's completely open, and it actually evolved a lot during the project. And maybe I didn't point it out, but the teachers can the pilots can also add sentences, new sentences. Yeah, they can add them directly, and that's how we also when they added them the first session, we then asked them, do you want us to integrate it into the other sentences, or was it just a one shot, you don't want it? So yeah, it really evolved a lot. I could find the first screenshots of but it doesn't look at all like what it looks like now.
And at least maybe to go to the conclusion, we have to think about we are in a philosophy of individual things. We are individual, and each object is unique, and here we think about relationship and relation between each other. And it's very funny because in an artistic way, there is experiments to share the presence of the same avatar, because when you are not in the same room, but where you are in a distance with a metaverse or video games, no one know there is several people behind the avatar. And I interviewed some video gamer who are always together in tandem, and they explained to me that there is like a co-pilot really in a car. One control really the systems, the interface, and the other study the interface, study the map, or show or keep the place, the role of distance about the situation. More strategical, more tactical, and more also maybe the controller make a lot of things to please the co-pilot, because he knows the co-pilot is an observer. He loves to suggest, the observer loves to suggest, and the other interpret and do really the things. And we have a complementary systems when for both person, and maybe it's not usual, but it was very interesting to rediscover the same structure than the sportive pilot of car in the competition with because when you do action, you are inside action, you are inside the process with consequences, etc. And you need, and it's very useful to have another side help, side forces with you. So it's a point.
I see what you mean. Yeah. And I think that's kind of what happened with our pilots, our tandem of pilots. I like the word because that's true. They really had to work together and do something that was coherent. And when it wasn't coherent, they kind of, you could see that they were uneasy, and then they laughed at the end. I think the one that's controlling most of the, let's say, that has the higher view of where they're going, is the one that was controlling the sentences. And then the other one was there to add like little details.
Puppet master, like a puppet master.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Was there to add little details that made it more intense, you know.
Yeah,
and it would work more or less well with some tandems. Some tandems, you could see it just didn't work well. It was mostly the ones that knew each other. Well, they were friends. You could see there were these two ladies that were definitely friends, and they were great as a tandem because you really saw that they could do and you could see how it evolved too, because the first try that they did, it was still a bit hesitant. The person who was doing the second person who was doing the puppet master, she didn't do very much. And then little by little, she was given more room by the first person and more silence. And then within the silence, then that's when you can add very meaningful movements. For example, if there's a long silence and suddenly the person does like this, it has a more intense effect. And then we even added more custom what's it called, movements, because the movements, well, the basic movements that you can see, I don't think I have the new ones. They weren't intense enough. We have a new movement which is like this. And that, if you add that during a long phase of silence, that's a killer. It's just like, oh my God, what am I going to tell this person? It's okay, don't worry.
They explore together the agentivity of the interface avatar, because avatar with all the potentiality, and in reference with real life also, because if someone say in silence, it's usually you need to have a conversation. But I think we need to continue this work to explore avatarization, because there is avatarization of a situation, of a process, of a case. That's a case of the teacher in difficulty, but also avatarization of the team inside the avatar, because there's some they are maybe agree about what we have to reply in this case. So there is a common sense, a little common sense together about the avatar. So the avatar connect, and there is also the credibility for the group. So I think this kind of avatar shared is very useful to better understand the classical mono-person controlled avatar. And that's why I love your innovation, your invention, because she's really not in the classical way. It's between different role-playing simulation, the classical QCM, multiplayer, in a question when you have a free choice.
Multi-answer, no, wow.
Anyway,
Multi-question answer, no.
Yeah, the simplification
That's saying, yeah.
of ping pong to reply. So it's between lots of different fields, and I think it exhibits. There is an extraction of knowledge, very interesting to concept, to have another concept and to think about both complex system of creation. In this case, there is a creation. I think it's very simple. It's very mechanical. We could criticize your system. We say it's not enough. There is a lot of limits at your system. It's clear. No,
there's lots of limits, but in the other sense, it's very open, which is great because you can do whatever you want with it.
Yes, and the limits are also a structure of they show the classical structure. They show it's a limit case. We say a K-limit. It's a limit case. It's a K-limit. It's a case not in a coincidence with it's not typical. It's atypical, and so it's analyzed better the classical system. That's why we are very happy to start with your experiments as a case study for think about avatars.
Well, you're welcome. I'm glad you liked it.
Thank you very much, Iza. So we go to stop now, and maybe another episode, another experiments together with other people. I think about high-level thinker, political people, and I'm sure when you have an elector, for example, will say, "I'm not happy about your political behavior," and if you make an avatar of an elector, I think there is a lot of situation you could apply in your systems, and it will be funny to train.
I'm currently in contact with the hospitals that would be really interested in the system to teach new novice doctors how to announce difficult diagnostics, or basically someone who's going to die, and they're interested in having this, especially, well, it's kind of horrible, but they're mostly interested in having it because they can't have, usually they use actors, but they can't have any children actors. So they would like to test the system with children, which would actually be interesting for you, because there it's a projection not only into someone who's sick, but also a child, which is mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's an alternative from an adult to become a child. So thank you very much. We're going to stop the diffusion and see you later in another field of research. Thank you. Bye-bye, Etienne. With pleasure in Paris.
Hello. Bye-bye.
Yes, the next session is the 6th of July.
And thank you for the presentation.
Very clear. We understand everything, and we have a lot of questions to continue. Merci, Etienne. Thank you, Etienne. And we have another session, the 6th of July, with Yan Min at the MSH Paris Nord for a big session about the artistic approach of avatar in simulated environments. So let's keep in touch. Bye.
You need a jingle at the end. Do, 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 do.
You are the jingle. You are the avatar of the future jingle. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.